Okay, Charlie, opening up the January 2018 meeting of the Southampton Village Zoning Board of Appeals. First thing we have is a decision on number 70 South Hill Street. Can I have a motion on that decision?
Now, just to refresh your recollection, this decision is written as a declination.
Right.
So an affirmative vote on the decision will be to decline the application.
Right. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All in favor of the decision?
Aye.
Aye. You in favor of the decision too?
Yes.
Okay. Here it is. The decision that you wanted, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, it's not the one that you wanted, but it is a decision.
What is the decision?
It's a decision
Deny.
to deny it.
And everyone voted to deny this?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask why?
Small lot, front yard.
Small lot, front yard, but that's why we went before the zoning.
I know, but we've
They
always...
just thought it was too
had a-
small.
Yeah.
But there are other stipulations, there are other examples in the
Not
village
really.
where they had the same situation, where they were approved?
People usually withdraw the application when they get the idea from us that the lot just can't handle a pool. We've had several like that.
It's explained in the decision.
5 pages there.
Thank you.
On the application of Beechwood Latch LLC, we have a request for adjournment till February. May I have a motion on that?
I move that we adjourn until February.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You second that.
I second.
That brings us up to case number 2991, 472 First Neck Lane. I'll give you that, and then have the other one, please.
Good evening. For the applicant, my name is John Bennett and Reed, 212 Windmill Lane, Southampton, New York. I'm getting up the affidavits of posting and mailing. Just trying to see what is the best route for everyone. All right, this is a... Not a paper, but pretty strict. Excuse me, that's... Is that yours? Nope. Okay, sorry about that. Taking up too much space, sorry. You want a business card? Okay.
You can't be looking for work.
I know, I'm just being tempted, comic relief. Maybe a bad one. So we're back here. We were here a couple months ago, and Tim is here with me, as Melissa and Lisa Zaloga, the project architect. We're here for two things. One is a front yard variance for a now detached garage, and the other thing is to really tweak an existing wetlands permit that you've given. And actually, in rethinking this and listening to some public input and some input from the neighbors, we've actually come up with a scheme that we think works a lot better than what you approved. And we're going to offer some additional mitigation. So, there are two matters before you. One is the request to amend the wetlands application. And the other one is to grant a front yard variance for this proposed one-story garage. Currently, there's a guest house in the area where the garage is. That's going to be extinguished. There will be no guest house. That's going to go away. And the garage is conforming in size. It's 41 feet from the Jiffer property to the north. So it more than conforms with the side yard setback, and it's over 700 feet from First Neck Lane. So it's the type of, I don't like to be presumptuous about anything, but it's the type of application that the board has seemed to smile upon, because you have wetlands over here. That, of course, creates regulated areas that you have to stay out of. So the board has been fairly liberal with allowing location of garages in the or accessory structures in the front yard. Why don't I just take you through that first, because I think it's fairly straightforward. So it's actually, as I say, further away from the side yard than required. It's in the technical front, it's in the front yard, but it's about over 700 feet from First Neck Lane. This, I think I have copies of them for you. So again, you have the typical wetland situation. The Stevens property has a front yard variance for a garage. It's on that same right-of-way, and I'll hand up copies of that. For obvious reasons, the board felt it appropriate to grant relief there. And then the Frist, excuse me, I'm sorry, it's like the senator, the former senator. The Frist property also has a variance, originally a variance for a detached garage at 60 feet, and then what they did was they came in and they attached the garage to the main house, but a variance was granted for 35 feet for the setback front yard for the now attached garage there. So not only do you have a situation where it's the typical sort of...
Somebody's on the microphone.
That's probably me. Oh, sorry. Okay. So you have a situation where the typical, there's wetlands, so that pushes you up there. You have a front yard request for the garage. We're 700 feet from First Neck Lane, and there's the board has seen fit to grant front yard variances in that area before. Again, I don't want to be presumptuous. And then we're eliminating as with the prior approval, we'd be eliminating the guest house. So that's a non-conforming use in that area. You see, you'll remember, maybe you will, but it's been a while, but this is what was approved. So I have an approval map for you and how we want to amend it. And I trust you'll agree with me that it's a fairly light touch. But as it relates to there's a fairly significant change in what's proposed here. There was the garage at the westerly end of this wing, which is now most of the additions have migrated to this area, albeit, as I'm going to explain to you, no additional coverage in this area for any of the house. But so what we did is, you'll see that now instead of having this wing with an attached garage, the garage will stay in the same area, the guest house will go away, but since it's detached, it needs a front yard variance because it's an accessory structure in the front yard. But again, all to accomplish, based upon some public neighbor input, this new plan. So unless there are any questions about the garage variance, I think I'd move on. I think it's a fairly common request, a request that's been granted on this right-of-way, and a rather typical request for an accessory structure in a front yard where you have wetlands situation, but on top of that, you're over 700 feet from the actual First Neck Lane. Typically, I think it's fair to say that the whole rationale for keeping accessory structures out of a front yard is from an aesthetic point of view. You have the house, and you want to keep the accessory structures so it's not viewable from the street. This is 700 feet from the street. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses in effect, essentially in front of it. So, unless there are any questions, I think I'll move on from the variance aspect for the garage. That's the only variance request we have.
Has this plan that you now have, has it been before the ARB?
This plan, yes, it has. Yeah.
Is it receiving some favorable notices?
Now, I'll be very, very direct with you. I don't think this hearing should be about architecture, as you said at the first meeting. the reason we're redeveloping it, and I don't think that I would strenuously object to any referral to the ARB, because gentlemen, I'm not going to go into that briar patch. Just be very honest with you.
But you've been there, right?
I've been there.
You've changed the plan since you went there.
This plan, and the ARB lawyer is right here, this plan received what I think is only fair to say, a very, very, very favorable response from the Zach Studenoff, the architectural historian and expert. Now, he is not the board, but he is the expert. And of course, I have to gain their votes there, and I'll go back and do that. But I'm here to talk about wetlands. So are some of the changes, some of the stuff we heard, based upon some of the stuff we heard there? Yes. Are they from some other public input? Yes. Are they an attempt of the applicant to be a good neighbor and a good citizen? Absolutely. He's been extremely flexible. I mean, he essentially took a $400,000 design and threw it out the window to try to come back and to try to make something here that we, for whatever reason, some people are upset, so we're trying to make that all go away. And I think if good sense, common sense, and good faith prevails, we'll be able to do that. So it's from a series of inputs, but all indicative of some great flexibility on Ken and Anna Fox's part, and an attempt to make everybody happy. I don't think we're going to make everybody happy, but we're going to leave it up to this board and to the ARB. And then
I don't really have a problem with separating the garage, giving variance for the garage, and tweaking the house. It's just I'd have a concern that another neighbor doesn't like something, or the ARB doesn't like this, or somebody else doesn't like something in the press, and then you're back here next month because now we're going to tweak this, and now we need a variance for that. Now we got to change the setback over here. It's like a one-time deal here.
Let me be very honest with you. This is where I'm staying. Ken Fox has been so damn flexible, and some people, I've got. And I'm just going to put it right on the record. I have. The Southampton Association objecting to parts of this, and I have two members on that ARB that one is the former treasurer of the Southampton Association, and the other one, his wife is a member of the Southampton Association. Okay. So I've come to this board for reasonableness and sanity. I don't know how else to say it to you gentlemen. I can always speak to you about reasonableness and predictability within certain means and a rational legal response. This is where we are. This is where we're going to stay. And if it means that I can't garner the votes in the ARB to do this very, very, very straightforward plan, I think two of the members don't have any problems with it. I think their expert doesn't have any problem with it. But if that means I have to go over to Riverhead to tell the ARB to approve this plan, I guess that's what I have to do. So you're not going to see me back here.
Okay, good.
So what have we done? And I'll just try to run through it quickly. In terms of the wetlands changes, Tim is here. We've made no changes to the 50-foot buffer that you've required, because you'll remember the 50-foot buffer, even the objectants expert said was a good idea. We have that new sanitary system, which is going to take 50%, it's going to be a 50% reduction in nitrogen loading, and that's out of the malice of the expert that the Taconic Baykeeper hired to do the Lake Agawam study. We hired him. We figured who would be better to do that. We have that, what they call the innovative alternative system. So what we've done in here is we've done some modifications in here. I think it's best seen on this. If you focus in this area, you can see the changes that have been made. What have we done? We had 579 square feet of habitable coverage area within the 150 square feet. And that actually is we're proposing 579 square feet of habitable coverage area here and here. And that amounts to 13 square feet less of coverage for habitable space than was in the original plan. So not much, but we pulled it in, and we're certainly not being more aggressive than the plan that you approved. And then we had, in order to pick up a little bit of a detail here, we have 13 square feet, we have 307 square feet of porches, and that amounts to 13 square feet more of coverage for the porches that was previously approved. But the net is that we had 886 square feet of coverage within the 150 feet. You're ending up with 886 square foot of coverage for structure within the habitable square feet. The addition is going to be 132.6 feet from the delineated wetlands. Your previous approval was 132.4. Tiny bit of an increase, but certainly no greater. So we're all staying within the parameters of your prior approval. I think the big thing in terms of coverage, however, is the difference between, and we have a chart which should be in the file. I'll have Melissa go through that quickly. The actual total coverage within the 150 square feet of regulated area will be reduced by 778 square feet. And I think that's really, really significant and really substantial. So it's a better plan in terms of reduction in coverage than you've already approved. And a lot of that happens in the following way. We're pulling back substantially the driveway from what was proposed. So you're going to have an area that was proposed to be impermeable that's now going to be permeable. Can you just tell a little bit about the difference in the plans? Tim, is that okay with you?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Tim Rome from Camaris Design for the applicant. As Mr. Bennett was saying, you can see in the plans, the approved plan that's on the top of this larger plan and what our amendment is looking at. You can see graphically how we've reduced that the overall coverage by that 778 square feet, and just by consolidating that footprint and reducing the size of the driveway and the parking footprint.
What's coming down to you is the comparative, the before and the after. So we're coming to you with a wetlands plan that is actually, from a point of view of coverage, not only the prior, I think the prior plan actually had a little bit of increase in coverage.
Actually,
Melissa, come up and talk about it.
Sedevich Botanic Environmental, we're actually 1,032 square feet less than the ZBA approved plan with pulling back the driveway more than what the original approved is. So actually, even though we're asking for a modification, we've decreased even further the amount of lot coverage within the 150-foot jurisdiction.
So, had it not been for the fact that we were adding this porch here, and even though we're reducing the coverage here, we're grabbing some of that square footage and putting it up here for this porch, I think I would have stood on pretty good grounds in saying there's really no need whatsoever to come back for the wetlands relief. But since this is even though the net is less, this is an added feature within the 150 feet, but still, it's, I think we figured out it's, again, there's no net coverage, no net increase in coverage of the habitable areas, and it's still, forgive me, I have the number right here. Yeah, in this area, the house is 80 feet from the wetlands. This little porch area is to be 118 feet from delineated wetlands, so it's still 40 feet behind the existing leading edge of the house. So in any event, trying to think if there's anything else. I think, I don't, again, I'm always risking being, sometimes, how do I say this? Based upon what you folks have done in the past, have, I think, a good indication of how you like to look at these things, so I hate to be presumptuous, but I'm just going to come out and say it. I think that if it wasn't for some of what I can only call some fairly manufactured concerns by some people regarding this project, this would probably be an amendment that you deal with in about 5 minutes, which is really what I'm trying to do right here. Actually decreasing significantly from what you approved and what we're proposing here, the amount of hardened surface and coverage by quite a bit, and I'm not increasing the area at all that's going to be covered by structure, and I would hope that you would agree with it. A couple of other things. I told Mr. Fife, who's here representing the Giffras, that I would have no objection to simply incorporating by reference, and this is an attempt to save time, to be honest with you, incorporating by reference on the record in this amended application everything that he had put in the record on the prior application. My hope is, again, to save everybody time and just agreeing to let all of that come in. Trying to make sure, give me a second, make sure, anything I've forgotten, folks? Yeah, that's where we are. Tweaking the wetlands, a net increase in the amount of permeable space, and asking for a rather benign variance request for a garage, and eliminating a non-conforming use, specifically the guest house. Any questions?
Dan?
Can you just quickly run over the porch area is encroaching a little bit more, or what? Could you clarify that, what we were saying there?
Billy, want to go? Sure.
So overall, the coverage for structures within the 150-foot setback is identical. It would be 13 square feet less habitable space coverage and 13 square foot more porch coverage. So if you look at the comparative plan, we kind of borrowed porch space from over here and are proposing to construct a front porch on the front elevation of the house. The front porch on the front elevation would be about 118 feet from wetlands, where the existing house is at 80 feet. So we're actually not encroaching any farther than what the existing house is.
Well behind that.
And we've just basically relocated the coverage that had been previously approved by this board to an alternate location on the property.
And the alternate location is actually to the west.
Correct.
Yes.
So I think it's clearest in the diagram that Tim's office had prepared. The survey gets confusing with all the dimensional information needed.
But by doing that, you're able to cut down, to move in the garage, you're able to cut down how much driveway is in the...
That's one of the things that we were able to accomplish by that. And then, to be honest with you, we just pushed real hard and tried to tighten that driveway a lot. Fair to say, Tim? Yeah. We just found the space. I said we're going to go back there. We're not going to increase the area coverage within the 150 feet that has been approved. That's going to net out, but I want to give the board something else because we're back here. I just psychologically, to be honest with you, we're back here asking for an amendment. I want to give the board something else, so we tighten up that driveway really substantially. How many square feet did we lose on the driveway from what was originally approved?
It's about 1,000 square feet. Originally, we were looking at a reduction of driveway coverage of 696 square feet in the 150-foot setback, and now we're looking at a reduction in driveway coverage of 1,606. within that.
Like
So
1,000 additional
square feet of driveway coverage.
out of the wetland setback area.
Yes,
Correct.
so
Reduction.
that's the bonus for us coming back and bothering you again.
Did we look previously at not just lot coverage, but square footage in the
Actually,
wetland
we are
setback, or-
reducing the size of the house by how many square feet?
208.
208 square feet.
The overall size?
It was always, yes, the overall size, but it's always been about coverage, Mark. No, there was never any inquiry under that on the prior application. But I thought you would be interested to know that the overall square GFA of the house is being reduced by 208 square feet. It's also, this house is what's the number? It's 6,000?
The gross floor area of the house will be 6,982 square feet, 208 square feet less than previously proposed. And it's 6,875 square feet less than would be allowed on this property, so it's about 50% the size of the house.
It's like half the GFA that would be allowed.
Yeah, my question is, how much of that square footage is within the
500 and, what is it?
within the 150-foot setback?
It's the same. We've netted out.
So
yes,
the square footage
There's
within
no
the-
net increase in the square footage within the 150
In square footage?
It's very, I said,
Okay.
I said to the team, not one more square foot. I mean, you know these approvals. You know why I said that. I didn't want to ask for 1 square foot more of habitable space within, actually, we go down 14 square feet. We actually took away 14 square feet.
14 within the
Coverage,
setback.
yes. Yeah.
Dick, do you have anything?
I don't.
Vote?
Yeah, I have a question, John. Looking at the two maps, the purple shaded area are areas to be removed.
Yes, always have been.
Right.
Those are the same. Are the same?
They are the same, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they're the
So
same.
what is being removed? Is the driveway being
The driveway is getting
narrowed in
Yeah.
its arc?
Yeah, see, look at it.
Is it possible, is it possible to put another color in there as to what the new driveway will look
Well,
like?
it's here. I can,
I know, but it's all in black and white.
okay, yeah, we can do that.
Crosshatch over the purple, but show us in maybe yellow where, all the way up to the garage, where the new drive area is going to be.
Oh, so here it is, right here.
I see it in black and white,
Okay,
but it's very faint on this drawing. Maybe it's better on the big one that you've got, but on the small one, it's tough to pick this up.
Penned over, excuse me, but see how much smaller the driveway is than it was
Yeah.
permitted?
So we don't have any linear dimensions on the width of that.
Site plan.
Yeah, it's on the survey.
It's on the site plan. Sorry.
The map of property
Hold on a
shows that the existing driveway is 74.3 feet, and the proposed driveway is 108.5 feet. So that's called out on the dimensions
Pulling things back here.
from the wet,
Yeah, but I'm talking about,
on the color diagram.
yeah, where it arcs through the wetlands is what I'm trying to...
It arcs through, it's no...
Well, you've got
You mean
this...
through the regulated area?
Yeah.
Oh, we've got that on the survey as well,
The
though.
survey shows
The survey shows the
125 and 150.
125 and then 150.
Oh, okay, all right.
I
That's
think
great.
I have what you need. I could be
All right,
wrong.
that's all right.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the small one, it doesn't quite jump out at you. John, you can take these then.
Oh.
As long as they're in the
Oh,
file.
leave them there, you can have them. I don't need them.
They're in the
Well,
file.
have them so you have... yeah,
I'd rather keep them in the file.
I'd like to hang us for paperwork.
So I'm going to ask, obviously, you're not going to make that determination until you're here. One thing I do want to add. There was a survey, this is important, there was a survey that was only submitted yesterday, but it has nothing to do with the wetlands relief and nothing to do with any variance relief. This one-story addition here, hope everybody can see it, was originally here, closer to the Gifford property, and making this facade as it relates to the view shed in from across Agawam longer. And Mr. Studenroth said he would prefer this one-story addition here. So again, this is not about, has nothing to do with this board. This board has nothing to do with the architecture. I just want to explain to you why we gave you a new survey, because this addition here, which is well beyond 150 feet and is absolutely conforming in location, used to be here, and now it's here, but it has nothing to do with any of the request for the garage, and it has nothing to do for a request for a permit within the regulated area, because it's well out of the regulated area. So it's really of no moment. It's just to cross the T's and dot the I's. Didn't require, spoke to the village, didn't require any additional posting or mailing, because there's no relief required for any of it, and for zoning, and it's not within the regulated area.
John, what's the revision date on that plan?
The revision date on this plan is the 23rd of January. The prior
was hand-delivered?
Yeah, the prior one is the 8th. That's been in the file for some time, and as a matter of fact, we've sent all this stuff to Mr. Fife. I'm sure he'll, the prior survey we sent to him and the application we sent upon our filing, because we knew he was going to ask for it, so we sent it to him. I'm sure he'll acknowledge that. The only thing that came in somewhat late is something that has nothing to do with why we're here, which is... Say again? Sorry.
We get it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Just throw something at me. That usually works.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to be heard to this application? Mr. Fife.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Patrick Fife, Toomey Latham Shea, Kelly Dubin, and Quadraro, 51 Hill Street, Southampton. Here again on behalf of the Chiffers, 452 First Neck, and the Stevens, 468 First Neck Lane. Just first, a point of procedure, as John mentioned, he and I did speak, and I think we're in agreement of having the record from the prior proceeding, since this is an amendment with respect to the wetlands permit, but having that incorporated into the record of this proceeding for efficiency purposes. And I'd just like to get a confirmation from the board, and I guess also maybe from council, that that's an acceptable protocol here.
Acceptable to council.
Okay. So, I mean, just to the extent then, I would renew the objections that I raised on the original permit with respect to the amendment, just so the record's clear on that. That being said, I have a few very quick additional points that relate to the amendment and relate to some developments I think that have occurred since the original application. The first one, and I think it was something that you touched on, I mean, this plan has now been amended 3 times since it was before you, as a result of comments from the ARB's consultant, from the ARB, from the public. So, as I urged last time, I do think it is appropriate to at least hold off on a determination here until the ARB has made a final determination. I think had that happened the first time, we might not have even needed to come back here a second time. But I just don't think it serves anyone's benefit to potentially have to come back here a third time if the plan is again revised, despite Mr. Bennett's assurances that that's not the plan. I think until the ARB makes a final determination, it just seems that it would be appropriate to hold off for the purposes of efficiency. As we had mentioned below, I think the Department of State recommends that coordination. So I do think it is appropriate, again, to avoid redundancy, being back here potentially a third time, that you at the very least hold off on a determination. The next ARB hearing, I believe, is scheduled for the second week of February. So I don't think there's any prejudice to the applicant. I mean, obviously nothing can get built until the applicant has both approvals.
If the applicant has to amend the plan, isn't it actually better that this was closed? Because then he's got to renotice for the amendment. If it's open, he just comes back and you don't have a notice issue. You don't have a renotice.
Right. Well, what you're saying, I think if this just kept open, you wouldn't have to necessarily renotice.
Yeah, so isn't it better for anybody opposing this that it's renoticed?
I just think for the purposes of efficiency, it makes sense to keep it open.
He's the one that's inefficient. The board is going to still have to hear it, right?
I guess,
I'm just saying, I'm not sure I follow that logic in that sense, because again, if you're renoticing it, you've now let everybody know that who might have an issue get another notice. The board has to hear it. They've got to amend their plans.
Well, I think for the purpose of having, I guess, a clear record and avoiding the possibility of, I think, multiple determinations.
The board wants to close it.
Okay. I wanted to make my point with respect to that.
Because of the garage?
You'd have to renotice any new application.
No, was this renoticed?
Oh, absolutely.
No, they did notice it. They did notice the garage.
I'm not sure I see the linkage between the efficiency and whether you've kept this open or you've shut it, and I can see other reasons, but I'm having trouble with that linkage.
Again, I just think coordination with respect to
I understand
both
that.
boards does make sense.
There's really not any coordination here in terms of communications between the boards. Okay. It's okay.
Well, I'll renew the request with respect to that.
I understand.
Second point is just that we had raised the point below that the village was on the verge of enacting new legislation at the time with respect to the requirement of an advanced septic system. Since October, I believe in December, the trustees did pass legislation requiring for any construction that occurs after March 1st, an advanced septic system for a project like this. So I do think now it is at least appropriate for the board to consider that a requirement as opposed to a purported benefit for this application.
Right at the very beginning. It's one of the
Again,
first things you ever said.
Correct. I know that, but I think that that has been advanced as one of the benefits of this application
You
to
want
say
us to
that.
put it in our decision, is that what you're saying?
I'm noting it for the purposes of evaluation, that is now a requirement as opposed to something that the applicant's voluntarily doing. Just for the purpose of the record, I want to have that noted, that change in the law has now occurred. At the time that the application was granted previously, it was not a requirement. I think two other quick points. The proposal does include more square footage, not footprint-wise, but I think I wasn't clear on Mr. Greenwald's question. I know he had asked about lot coverage and I believe also square footage. I mean, what is now proposed within the wetland setback is 2 stories, whereas previously it was 1 story. So there is an increase in square footage. The lot coverage is the same. I know there's a different proportion between porches and habitable living space, but there is an increase in square footage now within the protected wetlands area. My final point, and I'm not going to revisit the bedroom issue. I know that you've made your determination with respect to the arguments we made concerning certain rooms. And I know we argued over those rooms and you disagreed with our position. However, I did want to point out there is one room on the new plans that was not previously discussed that was labeled as a bedroom on the plans that you approved. The plans that your October decision approved included a 3rd floor, what was labeled, and these are the July 18th floor plans that the applicant submitted and that were part of what was approved by this board. Included on the 2.5-story level bedroom in this location. And now on the current plans, same room. What's that? They had
Bedrooms on the 3rd floor.
they had actually shown 3 bedrooms on the 3rd floor, and that's by their count, not by mine. They had shown 3 bedrooms on the 3rd floor.
The new plan shows 2.
What was that?
This one shows 2.
This one shows 2, correct. And the point that I wanted to note is that what had been a bedroom has now been relabeled a 170 approximately square foot laundry room, complete with a bathroom, closet, and still the same size. But with respect to, I believe, your code, I think that should be, there's no exception for what's now been labeled a laundry room. It still meets the definition under the code with respect to off-street parking, and I also think with respect to the analysis of environmental that it should be considered a bedroom. Again, it's capable, it had been labeled as a bedroom, it's the size of a bedroom, it meets all the other definitional requirements under any other code for use as a bedroom, and
The
therefore...
building inspector call it.
The building inspector, the applicant did submit a letter.
If I may, I'm not interrupting. There's January 20, well, I am, just for the sake of, I apologize. There's a January 25th letter from John Foster that the current drawings, January 22nd letter, are proposed a total of 9 bedrooms.
And that's what you had before?
Yep.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say
There were 9 bedrooms. They were counting, though, again, this as a bedroom. Now they are not counting this as a bedroom, but still claiming they only have 9 bedrooms. So to the extent that that letter came in from the building inspector, and we disagree with that interpretation, and I think the board has the authority to review the building inspector's determination in connection with this application. And I would urge the board that in evaluating this, that it does consider this room to meet the definition of a bedroom, and that in evaluating the environmental impacts as well as evaluating the off-street parking, that it should consider it a bedroom. And again, this is not, I know you disagreed with me that I was using plans the applicant had submitted. These are not only the applicant's plans that they submitted, but the ones that were approved showing this room as a bedroom, and in size and every other manner. It hasn't changed other than the fact that they're showing a washer and dryer and they labeled it a laundry room. So I do think that room does warrant your review with respect to this particular application. So that's all I have with respect to the amendment, and I appreciate the board's time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak to this application? No. I think we'd like to close it.
Well, I think there's an open question. I thought you were saying that the gross floor area, within the regulated area, the gross floor area
Yes.
was being reduced.
No, I didn't say that. I said
Okay, then I
the
misunderstood.
overall gross
Could-
floor area
right.
of the house is being reduced.
Right.
And I reminded everybody that this house is 6,500 square feet less than the permissible GFA. And again, this is not a house, a lot, where there is no room to do it. There is room to do it, so it's a very modest house. And the area that was being, yes, there is an increase in the gross floor area in some of that area that's within 135 feet as opposed to 150 feet of the wetlands, but I was very clear in saying that the amount of overall habitable space coverage, the area of coverage, which is all, any of the applications I've ever seen and any of the grants, you and I, in another matter, sat down one time and went through a series of Meadow Lane approvals where there was all talking about coverage. So you know that's what the board has always looked at in these applications. That amount of coverage dedicated to area to be used for habitable space is actually being reduced. Small, 13%, 13 square feet, but small.
Lot coverage.
Yeah. Lot coverage, exactly.
Okay?
Motion to close then for decision only.
You second that?
I'll second that.
He moved it. You second it?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Just a moment while we switch.
You gonna leave us now, Bo?
I'm leaving, I hate to do it.
I know.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you for your work.
Oh, sure. Sure. Okay, good.
Thanks, Dave.
Good night, Bob. Good night, Chick.
Good night.
Good night, Bill. Good night, Chad. Good night, David.
Something like this.
Skills here.
Good night, Chad. Good night, David.
I don't know if he left. I'll go outside and see if I can find him. Well, it wasn't a variance.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about any wetlands.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by the regulated
No,
area.
it's because it was the coverage, not the
Okay. Yeah, so we're not going to, okay.
So usually,
It doesn't, okay. Just clarifying.
He's coming.
No, I'm asking you, did you want me to consider that as a break in between?
On the application, case number 2984, Mitchell Family Real Estate LP, 180 Great Plains Road. For the applicant.
The applicant, Gilbert G. Flanagan, 21 South Main Street, Southampton. As you know, this is a continuing holdover application that was last heard in November, and it was adjourned for the meeting in December in order to enable us to go to the Board of Architectural Review on a referral from you pursuant to the section of the code which deals with historic structures. And you should have in your file by now the communications from the Architectural Review Board. There was a recommendation by Zach Studenroth, there was a report by him, and there was a resolution of the ARB earlier this week which adopted that report and found that the building, in fact, is of historic significance and is worthy of preservation. I don't know if you want it for the file, but I have copies of the minutes of the two ARB meetings. I didn't give you those, but if you would like them for the file, you don't want the paper? You're breaking my heart. In any event, I think by what we've given you, we've done our job under Section 11628K. Just to go over a couple of other points, you had asked a question about whether or not, granted the application, we would agree to upgrade the sanitary system, and I think there should be a letter in the file that says my client would do that. You also asked about buried fuel tanks. There aren't any. It's serviced by natural gas, so that's been covered. See if there's anything else I can...
Can I just ask the response to the question of upgrading the septic system? Is that to one of the new innovative septic systems, or
if that's what you insist upon, I suppose that that would be what they would have to do. There were a series of letters that I submitted after the last meeting. I assume that you have them all in the record. I won't bother going through them. You did have a couple of questions about the subdivision itself. I believe you wanted to see a copy of the current filed map, which I... This is relevant in the context of the previous variances. There were, as you know, there were a series of variances granted for this property starting in 1963 up through the late 1970s. You have copies of those, but what I thought I would do, so it's clear, by the way, the files on those variances were very skimpy. Some of them didn't even have surveys in them. But from what I was able to do in going through them, I made up a summary of what I believe they all did and what they didn't do, which I can give you. And I also made some notes on a copy of the subdivision map, which points to where I think the variances had an effect from the best that I could figure out. I'll give you those. And this map shows the original building to the west, and the central portion of it is one variance, and then...
What survey are you referring to?
This is the relevant portion of the map that's part of the application.
Okay.
So that's, and I'll give you that. To the best that I can tell from the very skimpy descriptions that were in the decisions, the good news is that the last survey in these variances pretty much shows the building the way it is now. The only exception was this little addition that was added to the northeast corner of the building, which was granted in 1977. Now, there was a question raised, I think at some point, there was some language in one of the earlier variances that said that no variances, additional variances could be granted for this building as a result of a subdivision. Now, there was, as you'll see in the maps I submitted originally with one of the earliest subdivisions in 1963, there was a sketch showing a 4-lot subdivision. If you look back, you should find that. That subdivision was never filed for, never implemented. And The only subdivision that was ever done since then was done in 2016, which I handled. And I can give you, but then ask to take that. This is the original filed map, which shows it as a two-lot subdivision. And obviously, this two-lot subdivision resulted in no variances for the existing house, so that we didn't violate those conditions by doing this subdivision. What I would like to do is to...
Gil, you're representing that, so the boundaries of the two lots there were what was initially discussed and reviewed in 63 and so on as part of a potential four-lot subdivision?
Yes, that's right. That's right. The four-lot subdivision, so far as I can see, never actually went to the planning board, but it was a sketch. And in fact, I'll pull out that map and show it to you, just so you know that we're talking about the same thing. Okay, this map was in the file, the subdivision, the variance that was granted in September of 1963. And if you look at this, I guess you can see it, there were four lots. At that point, this was in the 2-acre zone, the O1 zone. And I checked the perimeters of the overall property. It's the same property, so it never was part of a bigger property. This subdivision was never done. And it's interesting, if you look at some of the language, it appears that in those days they treated Great Plains Road as a side yard, because they talked about side yard variances for the additions that were done, which was bizarre, but maybe because it was a corner lot, they picked where the main entrance was and they called the other street a side yard. That's the only way I can make any sense out of it. Because obviously it didn't need any east or west relief, it didn't need any south relief. So I hope that little summary that I did shed some light on the history. I can obviously understand the concern that if this application is approved, in the future, nothing should happen to this building, couldn't happen to this building without a further variance from this board, and of course the approval by the ARB. So I don't know if there's anything else I really need to go over with you unless you...
I have a question, Gil. It relates to the allowable gross floor area calculation that's shown on the survey.
Right.
It appears to be just an overall number. I don't know if you have what is the existing gross floor area in the guest house.
I think I had the architect...
It talks about proposed, and it's well under the gross floor area, but I'm just wondering if we should document at least what's existing and how that's taken into account going forward.
According to John Rose's office, I did ask him that question, and this is, I'm not sure that this is all habitable space, but the total square footage of the building on both floors, including the porch, is 4,438 square feet. And I can give that to you.
See here in the file is a FOIL request. Did you have any letters of people
I've had
who opposed
nothing.
this?
I've had absolutely nothing on this at all, and I checked as recently as today, and nothing was in the file either. It may, in fact, I think when I look at that, I think that FOIL request was from a broker, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
As I think I indicated at the initial hearing, there have been quite a few showings, but no one is willing even to think about making an offer until this question has been addressed, so that's really why I'm here. The ARB was extremely explicit about what it said about the building.
Yeah, we have your letter.
Right, if you look at what Mr. Studenroth said, there were two different references he referred to. And the building is kind of neat if you go by it. You can't see much of it, but it's actually part of the wall that used to be part of the estate on Great Plains Road. Now, I can leave this with you, but if I can get it back, and I'll make a copy for you, because I have only, this is an original. So if you want, I can hand it up to you.
I think copy for you.
And then I'll make a copy and give it to you so you have it in the file.
It doesn't get lost somewhere.
Get more likely to get lost in my office than yours, but that's another story.
Do you have any questions?
Lisa, if you could just clarify, I'm not sure I understand the practical difficulty that's occurring. And again, I think I understand the chronology. There was a two-story garage
Right.
with an apartment.
apartment.
The applicant requested to convert that and expand it into a residence.
That's right. That's what those variances did, right?
And they occupied it as a residence, and they renovated it, and
Right.
it's what they wanted, and they requested from this board a variance to obtain approval to occupy that
Right.
as a residence. Then they had an 8-acre lot.
Right.
When they were living in that residence, they subdivided the 8 acres.
Yes.
And again, I'm
Yeah,
just,
that's right.
I'm reading through the papers, you're more familiar, so just
Right, 2016 was
correct
when
me.
the
So,
subdivision.
and that was in 2016. They subdivided the southern lot and the northern lot, and there's a statement in the conditional resolution saying, a representative of the applicant indicated the owner has no immediate plans to sell either resultant parcel, but maintain and use the two as one parcel, as is now the circumstance. And then it goes on.
Right.
Do they still own the
No, the
southern
southerly
parcel?
parcel was sold last year, and an application I know has been made to the ARB to build a new main residence on that parcel, and from what the village building department tells me, that was approved subject to a written decision. So those people are moving forward with building a main house on that property.
On the southern
Southerly
parcel?
parcel.
Okay. So the question I have here is that the applicants basically received everything that they've asked for, but now they're saying that they have a practical difficulty.
Well, as you probably know, that's not the test anymore. Practical difficulty is not the test, it's a balancing test. And in this particular case, there's a special standard when you have a building that's in a historic district which is possibly threatened with demolition or destruction. So that's the test. It's the balancing test with the special test of whether or not the building is worthy of preservation. And the test for that is what the ARB opines, and the ARB has opined that it should be saved. Now, at the first meeting, we presented our case. At the second meeting, they passed a resolution which simply said they had no problem with our application to you. Of course, that's not what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to go through the analysis, which they did at the subsequent meeting. So that's really the test. It's not so much practical difficulty as the balancing test and the architectural test.
And the balance is between what?
The benefit to the applicant versus any detriment that might accrue to the neighborhood. And that's a matter of state law. It's been that way for a while. The old practical difficulty, unnecessary hardship thing doesn't exist anymore.
But was the ARB asked whether the structure could be moved?
They weren't, but one of the things they did mention is its location is important because it started as a gatehouse. It's integral with part of the access to the property. So that would defeat its original history. They were pretty strong that they didn't want anything to happen to it unless we came back to them, and that was one of the conditions that they imposed. Besides, if you were to move it, then it would be less visible, and one of the things they like to have with historic buildings is they're visible from the street, and this one is to a certain extent.
Yeah, because as Wayne started to talk about, I mean, the plans that have been submitted I don't think take into account the square footage of this house, this guest house, because they proposed 12,000 square feet, which is the size of the proposed house, so they don't show a correct GFA for the proposal.
Now you have, so whatever the ultimate development of this property is has to conform with it, whatever the gross floor area requirements are. So that's, we're not looking for any building relief on this. We're not looking to bang one nail or move one piece of dirt.
I think a question would be related to whether this board would be willing to impose a condition that would cause the floor area, which would be an accessory guest house, from any maximum gross floor area allowed on the premises. I think given that the size of the parcel, it's not really going to have any major impact at all, but at least it is a condition going forward in light of the fact that you're allowing two dwellings, in a sense, one be a guest house on the property.
In other words, you're saying the square footage of this would be subtracted from the total when they do build a house, right?
Correct.
If I could have a clarification on, I think in some of the GFA calculations, they exclude the area of a garage. Part of this I believe, contains a garage. So to the extent that there's a garage,
That doesn't count because
we would want that.
can't live in that.
Right, we would want that excluded. I said, this is, what the numbers I gave were gross square footage.
Gross, so if you want us to exclude the garage, you better give us
What the number
all
of the garage is, I can do that. I can get that.
So, I mean, based upon, the test that you're highlighting for us, do we have enough on the record to indicate that, let's say it's a 4,500 square foot guest house, is something that conforms with the character of the neighborhood? Do we have enough on record to indicate that that's?
Oh, I think that this building certainly does. It's been there forever. This building is the neighborhood, really.
It's been there since the teens, I think, since the
Well, no, I understand that. What I'm saying is, and we have some aerials, and I know, Gil, you submitted some aerials, but I don't know, or I couldn't tell from those aerials what was the size of those structures, what was the size of those accessory structures. Were they smaller than 4,000 square feet? Were they larger? Is this going to be, regarded as something unusual, even in this neighborhood?
I think it probably is. The design of it's certainly unusual. It's the only building like that in the village. And again, we're talking here about things that are existing. So if something else, you're thinking about something else popping up somewhere else, this is really one-of-a-kind situation. But if you're concerned about precedent, which I know you are.
Well, I think most importantly is because Mr. Flanagan's clients applied under that section of the code with respect to buildings of historic or architectural significance, gives this board some latitude in granting the variances, provided there are conditions to preserve the historic structure, which is what has been recommended by the ARB in this case.
Correct.
And it gives you the ability to do that. So as far as precedent setting, if people are going to come in and utilize this section, that would be a good precedent, I think, for the village. But as far as any other landowner coming in and saying, I want to preserve an accessory structure that may not be historic and allow me to have, another dwelling, I don't think this would be applicable as far as precedent.
They couldn't use that.
They couldn't use that.
Right, they couldn't use it. The ARB has to make that finding. That was critical.
No, I guess my concern about, as I'm thinking about the precedential value here, is that somebody else could come in and say, I have a big property, I have an existing house on it, I live in it, but it's only 4,000 square feet, but I'd like to keep it. I'd like to call it my guest house, and I'm going to build, because I have 4 acres, I'm going to build another house. And the board has granted, in this case, do we have other cases like that? That would be the comparable case where somebody could come forward and say, we're also historic. We have most of those houses, might not have been what they build today, 12,000 square feet. That's my concern. So it's just whether or not we have enough
This is a little different. Like I said, this is a little different.
There'd have to be a pretty small inventory of that happening, I would think.
And on top of which, this, you gotta remember, this building started out as a gatehouse, as an accessory dwelling.
Well, the house is not that small. I mean, whether it's 4,000 or 6,000 square feet, I think the website says it's 6,000. It's been renovated. They live in it. It's a house that
The architect actually calculated the gross square footage of the building, and you have that in the record. We had John Rose.
Okay, so, but it's not, I mean, it's a 4,500 square foot house. It's not a small house. I don't know, for a fact whether there are any other large lots in the village that only have 4,500 square foot houses on them who would like to say, let me keep this as a guest house. Of course, that's historic. I'd like to keep this, but I'm going to build another big house, but I want to keep this as a guest house so that I end up with 2 houses. It's just what's on the record and whether or not you feel comfortable that...
And that would have to go again to the ARB to be declared historic or not historic.
You would have to say this is historic.
They'd have to do that before it came to us.
I just want to emphasize, remember that historically, which is one of the things that the ARB looked at, this building started out as an accessory dwelling. That's what it was. So for your analogy, you'd have to find something that's a main house that was once an accessory building, and now we want to go back to the way it was. And I don't know that you'll find that. you'll find anything like that.
No, you would just have to find somebody who is living in a house.
Well, it's distinguishable, and if you're concerned about setting a precedent and having a flood of applications, you'd have to start with something that started its life as an accessory dwelling, which this one did. In fact, that was the basis for the very first variance, that they recognized it was an accessory dwelling. That's how it started. So I think that
No, that's interesting.
that
You're
further
right.
narrows the
The precedent. Right, the location and the accessory.
Pretty small to find another one.
Very tight.
Yeah, no, that's persuasive.
all the ones I'm familiar with, all the buildings I'm familiar with started out, I'm thinking there was one on Gin Lane that I offered, there was another one on First Neck Lane, where they started out as guest houses, and they're still guest houses. So we're actually putting this back to the use that originally was designed for. So I think that helps.
Wayne, do you have anything else?
I have nothing else. I would, if the board's inclined, subject to submission, a copy of the map and any other calculations you have on the particular floor area in more detail than what you provided would be helpful as soon as possible.
Okay. If we could close it subject to that, I'd be
Is there
delighted.
anyone from the public who'd like to refer to this application? So you'd like to close it, subject to what you just said?
The written submissions by the applicant.
So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
You own 9 Middle Lane. The next one. There you are, sir. On the application of case number 2986809 Middle Lane. For the applicant.
Back again from December. I met Mr. Voorhees out at the site along with the contractor who's going to be doing the work, and came up with a scope of work statement that basically covers all the points Mr. Voorhees was concerned about.
So that's to do with the bulkhead, right?
Yes, correct. So part of it's going to be replaced, part of it's going to be removed. But basically along the sides of the bulkhead where it was, we were going to have to remove the existing bulkhead to meet the requirements of the DEC. We were going to cut that away and then install a new bulkhead, but to actually minimize disturbance, they're going to install the new bulkhead behind the old bulkhead first and then cut away the old bulkhead. And then as necessary,
Cut flush, right?
right, cut it flush, and if necessary, put some siltation fencing in during that process so we don't disturb any wetland vegetation. That's going to basically be mirror that work on the opposite side of the bulkhead, except they'll be working from a barge there because they can't really get access from the land. But that's going to be during high tide only. The one end, there's not really any vegetation so much to worry about. On the other side, there is a little bit of tidal wetland vegetation, but again, they're only supposed to work during high tide, so it shouldn't disturb the wetland vegetation. However, there's a little caveat in there. It says if we do disturb any tidal wetland vegetation, it'll be replaced basically in place in kind with the appropriate species. There's going to be a 5-foot buffer behind the bulkhead now of native vegetation, which was spec'd out again in that scope work statement. That was basically the size of it.
I'd like to have some fill too, right between the blade.
For where they're going to put the bulkhead in front of you, there's have to fill in some of the gaps. They're actually going to minimize it. They're going to take the whalers, I think, off of the old bulkhead, is particularly what he said. So, and some of the piling, so that gap is actually going to be not so much. It's not going to be out as far as in front of the existing bulkhead as we initially thought.
Yeah, we had as Sean said, we had a very productive field meeting. We also had one of the contractors there that I believe would be involved in installing it. So we did look at staging areas. They do have the ability to stage on a neighboring property, and we came up with this concept of doing the eastern portion from the upland so that we would not disturb existing tidal wetland vegetation. And the other parts that you can't access from the upland would be from a barge, as Sean said. So that was written up. We had a couple of back and forths on the scope of work for 809 Meadow Lane that's now dated 1/24. That should have been received by the building department yesterday. Correct? Yes. And so I'm satisfied that it addresses the questions that I had from the last meeting and that we've come a long way in addressing some of the construction aspects, the mitigation aspects in terms of replanting if there is disturbance, and I don't see any adverse impacts. I think it's a well-thought-out project now.
Do you have anything? Unless, is there anyone out in the public who'd like to hear of this application?
So I think we mentioned that if everything fell into place, and Sean did submit the first draft of the scope of work prior to the work session, that if everything fell into place, that we could consider issuing a permit at the board's discretion. So with that in mind, I did prepare a draft of one for your consideration. It's dated today's date. It has the special conditions, describes the project, reasons supporting the wetland permit, and references the appropriate plans. So you may want to consider that this evening if there are no other comments.
Wayne, all right?
If there's no other comments, there is a DEC permit in the file for the same work. It appears that our consultant has everything in good order. You can close the hearing, and if so inclined, you can adopt a resolution approving the special wetland permit.
So moved.
Second.
That's to close the hearing. And a motion to consider the resolution to approve the wetland special permit as per the conditions set forth in our consultant's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
Just did. Nine, 8-7, Morgan Shower. The application 2987, Morgan Shower, 38 Harvest Lane.
Hello. My name's Samantha. I'm here for the office of William Grieco, representing Morgan Shara. I'm here to seek an adjournment. I have an adjournment letter along with the mailing affidavit and the post affidavit. Here's the original.
You'd like this to be adjourned, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So I think we just look at the posting and the mailing. If that is in good order, you have jurisdiction to open the meeting and then consider the adjournment as long as there's no one here who has any comments.
Grieco?
I don't know.
Oh, it's the posting. It's the posting. A little heavier than usual.
So this is dated, this is stamped. You want-
We do have one letter in the file from one of the neighbors that object to this. I think we may have had one last month, too. We got one now from the Benedicts, who live diagonally across the street. It'll be in the file. All right.
Is there any
We have to
comments?
vote on the adjournment.
Well,
We better
first,
get
if
some
there's
information
anybody
from the
here
public first, yeah.
anybody here to
Yeah, because
Be
we
heard
didn't
on.
know that this was going to be adjourned, so we better ask if there's anybody out there who wants to speak to this application. Nobody? All right, now we have to move to adjourn it.
Correct. For all purposes to the next meeting, and are you going to be prepared to present the case at the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a
We
motion.
did note
and a
for the
second.
record that there was really nothing in the file explaining the application or how it meets the area variance test. So,
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
On the application, case number 2988, Clear LLC, 145 Lee Avenue.
Good evening, Melissa Dedovich, Peconic Environmental Associates, here on behalf of CLIA, along with the project architect Lisa Zaloga. The last, as you know, we're asking for relief for side yard relief for the pool house. Per the directive of this board, we did take a second look. We've actually reduced the size of the pool house from 699 square feet down to 560 square feet, which is a net reduction of 139 square feet. We've dropped the height of the pool house also from 16 feet, which is the maximum allowed for an accessory structure, down to 15 feet 5 inches, a reduction of 7 inches. And the big one is the proposed side yard setback has been increased to 25 feet, requesting, thereby decreasing the requested relief to 10 feet. The board asked us to take a look at different options. Actually, which way does it go?
Upside down.
Upside down. There we go. This should be in your packet. So we came up with two other alternatives from the original A, which has now again been increased to 25 feet. Originally we were asking for 20 feet. Again, the positives of A are we're only asking for 10 feet of relief. The pool equipment and the pond equipment are already located in this area and would be placed within the building, providing soundproofing not currently present. The affected neighbors, as you know, the McClanahans gave us a letter of support because the pool house will actually not only provide soundproofing for the equipment, but also provides some blockage of the pool activity and associated equipment noises, people playing in the pool, things like that. That was submitted at the last meeting. Again, these are outside. This location is outside and beyond both the DEC and the village wetlands regulated areas. At this location, A, the actual septic would be connected to the main house septic, which is located beyond the 200-foot wetlands jurisdiction, thereby increasing and maximizing the setback from the wetlands, and it maintains all these old growth trees. Now, we also have in the file, and we can go over this later, this is actually a tree survey that...
It's here.
It's right here.
It's right here.
It's right here on the table.
There you go.
Okay, these are the trees that are also noted on this site plan. So location B, which requires no relief, no dimensional setback relief, doesn't provide the advantages about the noise reduction that the neighbor would like and the client also would like. However, it also places the pool, and we talked about this briefly, but this actually shows it. I can't pick it up because of TV. Okay. We would need to get a DEC wetlands permit because we would be now within the jurisdiction. There's a 10-foot contour. We could not put the pool house closer to the pool. We also show here we're required to maintain 20 feet from the pool for sanitary without damaging the existing specimen tree that's right here. So one of the things we also have that I'd like to submit the letter, which I'd like to read into the file. We were asked to explore why we couldn't use B, and we had also mentioned about the septic issue. When we met with Lester Holden, who designed the septic system and the connection to the existing house system, we were noting that we would have to install a new accessory septic system below the 10-foot contour line, 150 feet from the wetlands, requiring a village wetland special permit because the sanitary system would be within 200 feet of the wetlands, and a tidal wetlands permit. Because the existing groundwater is at 2.2 feet, we would have to use retaining walls and fill. And we would have to locate the building over 50 feet from the pool to avoid the old growth trees, as we discussed here. Here is a letter from Lester Holden per the request of the board about why we couldn't use alternative B. I'll skip, I must have read the whole thing. I am a design professional for the proposed septic system at the above referenced property. Regarding the proposed septic system, I am writing to offer my opinion on two alternative proposals. Alternative A, which places the pool house north of the existing swimming pool, and alternative B, which places the pool house west of the swimming pool. The septic system designed for A results in a minimal impact to the site. A sanitary waste line would simply connect to the pool, from the pool house to the main house waste line in the basement and then feed into the system located at the street side of the house. No earth fill or retaining wall would be required, and all the components of the septic system would be land with a 200-foot wetland setback. The septic system designed for B would require the installation of a new sanitary system dedicated to the pool house. A retaining wall approximately 50 feet in length and approximately 100 cubic yards of fill would be required. Parts of the septic system would be C with a 200-foot wetlands setback. The retaining wall and septic system components would require cutting tree roots on 2 mature trees located to the south and west of the swimming pool. Another alternative B septic system option would be to try to feed into the main house system. This option is not practical since it would require pumping sewage uphill through bends in the sewer line, through a greater length of sewer pipe, and cutting tree roots at a mature tree at the south end of the swimming pool.
All right, so he's saying A is no good, and he's saying that B is no good.
No, he's saying A is good.
He said A was
A is
good.
good. That's A is
Oh, I see, okay.
minimal
all right.
impact. Minimal impact.
Thought he was going to say C.
C is, it requires the same amount of, actually, C still requires a side yard setback. Variance. You're not addressing any of the noise associated with the pool equipment over, which is already located at A. You're not providing any blockage of pool activity for the neighbor who did ask and actually has supported this request. You also have, we have that big tree there, which is number 3, which would have to be cut down, and that's a tree with a 9-foot trunk circumference and a 56-foot diameter canopy. And we would still have the same issue with more difficult connection to the house septic system, or possibly requirement of a separate septic system. Again, we talked about the fact that we believe there's a portion of this is actually on slab. But again, we go back to it's the same amount of relief for A and C.
Actually, it's 1.5 feet more
Closer.
relief.
More relief because of where,
What you're recommending is A.
correct.
I have a little question. One of the things that I watched the video, I wasn't here at the last meeting, and the size, and I guess originally it was 20 feet from the sideline. Now you've reduced the size of the building and you're 25 foot?
Yes.
Correct.
But you could get it closer to the pool, but you have this wing that's on this one side, which is like a laundry room. But if that wing wasn't there, it seems to be you could get this pool 5 foot closer.
Do you mind, we discussed that at the
Discussed
last.
the wing last time.
Yeah, but I mean, the main room on this, the pool house, the main living area is like 400 feet. It's like, it's a big main room. So, yeah, I know you talked about symmetrical, but we're just talking about design. That's because you're keeping it in this sort of T-shape, you know? I mean, you could redesign it and not have that wing there, and you could slide that whole pool house 5 feet closer, and it'd be 30 feet from the property.
Right.
What's the setback requirement there?
35.
Yeah, so...
When we were talking here last month, we were talking about whether we could shift it closer to the pool and also further west, and we were still trying to avoid these trees. There's also some brick walls and all kinds of masonry things where everything is built into it. We also need to stay 20 feet away from the pool so that we're not disrupting the pool, and because it's a gunite pool. So there were a couple of reasons why right now we're at 20'4" from the edge of the pool. So we were trying not to disrupt that 20 feet from the swimming pool.
Yeah, but constructing it 15 feet for the pool isn't going to destroy a gunite pool.
20 feet is what septic systems and all those other kinds of things are supposed to stay from the swimming pool. So we were trying to maintain that. As we get closer, I'm starting to get closer to the house.
I guess I don't have any decent picture showing me what would be destroyed by moving it 5 feet closer, you know, so.
We did, the last actually,
Can't really.
we have the
In other words, you say take up this wing here,
Yeah, the patio, the front of the house.
and then move it up this way.
Yeah. There you go, there. Okay.
Comes from Wayne.
Thanks, man.
As I start to shift west, obviously I'm trying to avoid these trees.
You wouldn't have to shift left, you shift to the,
Yeah, I'm not asking to shift left, just move it. If there's a laundry room in that wing, if that wasn't there, at all, then it wouldn't be too close to the house if you moved the whole pool house 5 feet closer.
No, then I'm just getting too close to the swimming pool.
You'd be 15 feet instead of 20 feet.
Right, like I said, I'm trying to maintain that 20 feet that is, it's the recommended setback for sanitary systems. It's a recommended setback to not disturb the
Yeah,
existing.
but there is no sanitary system.
Sanitary system.
I'm aware of that, but they use that as a guideline so that you're not digging too close to a swimming pool and creating cracks in the swimming pool. So that's why that's that 20-foot
You're doing a
setback.
crawl space for this, correct?
No, actually,
15 feet's not too close.
It's going to have a small basement for the
we're putting the
equipment.
pool equipment and the
So there will
pond
be a
equipment under
portion of
there.
it that'll go 7
Right.
feet deep. I'm trying not to disturb the existing pool, because obviously if I put a crack in the existing pool, then I'm
Yeah, but
causing a lot more
our
damage.
goal is to try to get it a little further off of that
Well, that's
line,
what we-
northerly line.
I believe she was trying to keep it, I mean, the pool, she was trying to keep it centered with the pool.
Well, it would still be centered with the pool.
Right. I think keep it
But I mean,
centered.
you can see from the neighbor's standpoint, and this is there's a 15.5-foot high hedge along this property line. Moving it another 5 feet isn't going to affect the neighbor in any way, shape, or form. It's not going to be visible. It's not anywhere near the pyramid law. It's only 15, it's the same height actually as the hedge. So you can see from the sight line, we're not anywhere close to
But the relief would
affecting
be
anything.
less. The relief would be 5 foot less than what you're asking for.
The relief would be 5 foot less.
Maybe the biggest drawback would be, is that a bedroom that's in the house? That
Yeah.
that bedroom would then be looking right into the side of the pool house.
Where's the bedroom in here?
Yeah, if you slid it forward, then that's sort of, right now, that, you have a view down here. If you slid it 5 foot forward, you would.
This is also and remember, we've actually removed all the windows that are going towards the neighbor. The neighbor has provided a letter of support. It's going to be pretty much where the pool house is sited now is in the location of the pool house, of pool equipment, so it's less disturbance to have to reset the pool equipment into the basement, into the cellar, I should say, crawl space.
We've gone from, that 15-foot relief was 42% relief. We're down at 28% for the relief requested.
Pool's over on the other side of the house.
He had that
We
letter
would,
he
we would
wrote.
require actually more relief if we put it on C, down to C.
On the south side,
And we're
Correct.
killing that tree. There's
And that
there's
tree
no
is
way
dead.
we're not killing that tree.
a good reason.
The only drawback to moving it forward is blocking the,
Like it's a bedroom.
yeah.
And potentially just hurting the pool. I can't say that we would or we wouldn't, but there is always the possibility.
No, I just, like I say, I think if you're going to block the view from the bedroom,
I mean, I wouldn't want that.
I wouldn't want that.
Mark?
I'm fine. No questions.
Wayne?
No, I think there's a,
Nope. Anyone from the public like to be heard of this application? It's very quiet tonight.
That's good.
Take it.
Oh, I forgot, what were we asking about the sanitary system and what type of new sanitary system was going to be put in?
Oh, yeah.
We were addressing that.
Sanitary system. You're going to keep the old sanitary system?
No, we actually, right now, in front of the health department, actually, to get approval for a brand-new septic system that's beyond the 200-foot jurisdiction, wetlands jurisdiction right now.
Right, and then the question came up whether it was going to be the new alternate.
No, we're
System.
going to be grandfathered in.
It'll be new, but it won't be new.
Correct, but it's over 225 feet, I believe, from the wetlands. It was, I think we went through this last hearing, I went through this with Mr. Bruin in front of the trustees about the fact of how long it takes to get to the health department and everything else, and we've been working on this project for 2 years, believe it or not. We had to get the DEC letter of non-jurisdiction and everything.
But you
so.
still don't have the health department approval, or you do, for the new septic?
No, we're just about to get it, yeah. Actually, to that effect, would it be possible to read into the record the decision tonight? Because then we could just No? Okay. Can't hurt to ask.
There's a lot of analysis here.
We can close this, right?
Yes. I have
I have a motion to close this decision.
Move to close this decision?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's her name? Our minutes person. I know Candace, but he's taking minutes. I'm recusing myself, so just wanted on the minutes. So Mark Greenwald is recusing himself.
Okay,
See you guys later.
all right.
Let's try and get out of here early.
So we need 2989, the Greenblatt Trust, 1990 Meadow Lane.
For the applicant, John Bennett and me, 212 Mill Lane. I'll go through this quickly. The board granted some dune crest relief. Oh, I'm sorry. Mike Shiano from InterScience is here. Bailey Larkin, my associate. Blaise McCoy was the project architect, and Dan Thorpe from LaGuardia Designs, who's the landscape architect. The board granted some relief some time ago for dune crest and for wetlands relief, and it was based on a traditional house. The client was in contract pursuant to obtaining permits for a house and chose a traditional house, and then when the client closed, hired Blaise that designed a much more contemporary house. So that gave rise to some changes in the site plan, not understandably. And although we are staying within both the dune crest setback parameters and the wetlands setback parameters, and in some cases increasing them, not by much, but increasing them, we're back here. I thought that it would be the better course to ask the board for a modification to reflect the current site plan. So this is, it's really a numbers thing, just to give you the assurances that we're staying within the previous relief. So, and this is all in the application. The proposed residence is 98 feet from the crest of dune, which is 0.8 feet further from the crest of dune than the approved plan, based upon your decision of just April of last year. The pool is 79.6 feet from the crest of dune, which is actually 4.9 feet farther from the crest of dune. There was a terrace at 63.5 feet from the crest, which is now, it's 3.3 feet further from the crest of dune than the other terraces. And the proposed sanitary system is 70 feet from the crest of dune, which is consistent with the prior approval. Now, it's 70 feet from the crest of dune, but when I say crest of dune, I mean the dollar line, because the actual physical crest of dune, we're probably 200 feet from that, or more. This is one of those areas that's seen a lot of, what's the word, is it avulsion? Where the sand increases primarily because of the extension of the groins down at the inlet. So, and as it relates to dune crest relief, this contemporary house and the site plan that's required for the contemporary house, we're either getting a tiny bit better or the same as the existing approval. And then there was some wetlands relief that was granted. The residence was 95.8 feet from the wetlands. That was the approval, the proposed residence is 95.8 feet from the wetlands, which is 0.3 feet further from the wetlands than was approved. There was an entrance stairs 72.6 feet from the wetlands, which is 0.1 feet farther from the wetlands than what was approved. A parking court at 61 feet from the wetlands, which is consistent with the prior approval, and a pool house 144.7 feet from the wetlands, which is consistent with the prior approval. It's a big lot, it's an 8-acre lot, and even though the house is going to look a lot different, and thus the site plan itself has a different configuration, we're not asking for any further relief as it relates to the crest of dune, and none of the improvements are closer to the wetlands than before. I think we're actually picking up a little bit of coverage. When I say coverage, I'm not picking up, we're reducing the amount of coverage. I did want Dan Thorpe to come up and assure you that his planting plan, which I'll show you, is consistent with the previously approved planting plan and as protective, and I think we talked about it using the same species.
Yeah, it's all the same previously approved species for the trees, shrubs, ground covers. It's all native within the 125-foot setback. So we took the previously approved planting plan from Aries Design and basically adjusted it around the footprint of the new architecture, matching all of the same species in native ground covers, shrubs, trees, in some cases adding some more trees.
I think I'll just interrupt you quickly. I think you have 1,248 square feet more of native vegetation in the approved plan, and that's in a comparison chart that's part of the application.
Yes.
Sorry, Dan.
No, that's right. So the net gain was over 1,200 square feet in native planting.
And it's consistent with the species that were part of the palette of the...
It's all consistent. In some areas, we added further quantities, but...
So essentially what you have is a design that is consistent with the prior approval. It's a different site plan, but it's consistent with all the setbacks, both wetlands and dune crest, but now this accommodates a contemporary as opposed to a traditional house.
And check any of the these grass path areas would all be native fescue mixes. So we're really trying to keep everything within that 125 foot strictly native.
Michael, anything to add? You don't have to, but...
Michael Shano with InterScience. As we had done with the previous approval, there is no net fill to be added within 125 feet of the wetlands setback, and the septic system will be greater than 200 feet as it was before from the wetlands, so it is meets the code requirements.
I think that's all we have. That's all the questions.
Why do we have the change from the previous, the approved?
I think the site plan is so significantly different.
So you went from a more traditional to a more
traditional house to a contemporary house. But look, you see the difference? Even though the setbacks are not changed, it's a different configuration, I think. So I think it was the better course, John Foster thought, just go in there and so that you have an approval that looks more like what you're going to build as opposed to this traditional house approval.
And so basically from what you described, everything is tweaked a little bit better than the original proposal. Is anything tweaked the other way?
No, nothing's tweaked the other way. And when I say it's a little better, I mean there's a 1,200 square foot pickup of native vegetation, but the other setback changes, the reductions, they're pretty small, but they're not, they're tiny, like crumbs. Yeah, they're fractions, yeah. But so it's not a big deal in terms of that, but
1,200 feet of additional native
that's good.
Vegetation is pretty good.
I think that's the only real different positive change, yeah, to be honest. The rest of the setback changes, they're either right at it or they're like tiny. Pretty much the same setbacks.
Did you compare the two, Chick?
I did. I thought that the comparison chart that Mike's office prepared was very helpful. Goes through the wetland setbacks and has, a couple of different levels of detail. I was going to ask where the 1,200 square feet of additional native plantings is, because that wasn't evident to me.
Well, the layout of the north side of the house is different than the original architecture in that. Yeah, so if you look at the new proposal, the garden areas punctuate into the building at the center here, whereas the previous proposal had much more structure within that 125-foot area.
So that's the area
we're able to bring more garden into the 125-foot zone along the front of the house.
And that'll be native.
That'll be native, yeah.
And I do recall this from the first review, that, that driveway and the turnaround and all of the fill associated with it, very close to the wetlands. And we felt that was a very good improvement to the property.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy, yeah.
So that, that was the logic for the granting the first one, and if we're just tweaking it.
Yeah, that's all, the driveway layout is going to be very similar to what was previously approved.
So we're still getting that full benefit.
Yes.
in other words.
Yeah. I think you're right, Chick, that's what drove the last approval.
Yeah.
I
I remember the discussion about the Bolivar line versus the actual dune line, and that was, presented completely for the record. So, again, that's part of this setback tweaking, and there's really no net decrease in setbacks. It's a slight increase.
Have any opposition in this? Because there's a FOIL request in here. Did anybody contact you?
Nothing I'm aware of.
Okay. Is there anything else? Right? Chick, anything
Anybody else here? Joe, you want to speak?
Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak to this application? No. Here go.
I would recommend, because this is a modification and there's enough detail, subject to Nelson Pope and Voorhees doing whatever review they need and providing the board with their report and special permit conditions. If, Chick, you think you can have that by the next meeting, I think we can have it closed for a decision.
Yeah, we're certainly not asking for any additional information from the applicant. I think it's complete, and we recognize that it's minor, and it still has the benefits of the original one. So we can easily reflect the new plans and the logic behind, granting that modification. And I can certainly have that ready for the February meeting.
I have a motion to close, subject to that?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good seeing you all. Thank you.
2990. Next and last. The application 2990, 35 Wyandanch Lane, 35 Wyandanch LLC.
Who went to Cornell?
One of our daughters went there, and now we have a grandson who's a senior there.
I was there.
Did you go to Cornell?
Sure. I was there undergraduate and graduate. 7 years there. It's fantastic.
7 years.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to visit them, aren't you?
Oh, we were there when my daughter was there. We were there several times, but that's 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And this is her nephew there.
Beautiful.
He's a senior. Bioengineering. It's not complicated for me to think of that.
But in the engineering school, or in the...
Science. I think more. Now he's looking for a job. Hoping to get a job before he graduates in May.
So if I need my bioengineer, he's the guy, huh?
Otherwise, I'll be back at the bathing court.
I'm going to head out.
All right, Chick, thank you very much. See you soon.
Take care.
Mr. Flanagan.
For the applicant, Gilbert G. Flanagan, 21 South Main Street, Southampton, I have an affidavit of posting and an affidavit of mailing. Myself organized here. This, on the face of it, is a fairly straightforward variance application. requesting a relief at one corner for a proposed one-story addition of 2.1 feet from the required 20-foot setback. Now, I'll note at the outset that the notice that the village prepared indicated there was a greater minimum side yard. That was a mistake on the part of the village. Actually, the requirement in this particular instance, based on the size of the lot, is 20 feet, and the aggregate side yard we don't need any relief from because this is a non-conforming lot with respect to its width. But if you look at the notice that was put in the paper and that we mailed out, it mentions a number different from 20 feet for the side yard setback. The correct setback that we have to observe is 20 feet. So the relief we need is only 2.1 feet. I wanted to make sure that was clear.
On that point, I just want to, for the record, indicate I did notice that as well and question the building department what that was about. And they were actually anticipating an amendment to the the village code regarding the 4/10 in the larger zones, which has not taken place. And in fact, that was why they noticed it as such. So the actual requirement here is a 20-foot side yard setback.
We can't use the 4/10 here. We cannot use the 4/10.
Not for the minimum.
Doesn't apply. The minimum in the zone is 20 feet. Under section 116.11.1.
So you need 2 feet just for a slice of it.
2.1 feet, and I don't often bring an exhibit, but it's only at one corner.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. This is 2.1 feet scaled by Gilbert G. Flannery. There it is.
Thanks for the visual aid.
There you go. There's the visual. There's the prop. About half the width of the table. And bear in mind, if you look at the survey, it's only at one corner. We start out toward the street. The addition actually conforms. The only reason there's an issue is that the house, while it's parallel to the street, is not parallel to the south lot line. One thing I will give up to you, just to correct for the record, the survey that was submitted with the application identified a deck on the west side of the house. That is actually a porch. And so now, the deck is now a porch, and there's a CO for that, which I'll hand up, which was issued recently. But
A closed porch or open?
Open porch.
Does it have a roof?
I believe it does. It does, but it's not habitable space. So I wanted to make sure you have the right survey. As I say, this is a request for only 2.1 feet at a corner. It's a total of 21 square feet out of the 141 square foot addition. Now, the purpose of it is to add a bathroom to the existing master bedroom, which now does not have a bathroom. If you look at the floor plans that were submitted, the adjacent room does have a bathroom, but it's not accessible from the master bedroom. So the idea is to give this its own bathroom. And one of the reasons it makes sense to put it where it is that where the other bathroom is, there's an economy of scale in connecting the plumbing facilities. The calculations for lot coverage are shown on the survey. There's no problem with lot coverage. I also had Will Schultz, the architect who is here, do a summary of what the GFA is. And with the proposed addition, GFA would amount to 2,282 square feet, which is only 5.4% GFA. And as you know, you're allowed 12% plus 1,500 square feet. So this is not even close in terms of a GFA issue. In addition, this is a one-story addition, which has a maximum height of 12 feet 3 inches. So there is no question of any issue with the pyramid law, especially since the setback from the side lot line is 17.9 feet. As I mentioned before, we do not need aggregate side yard relief because while this lot does not need 4/10 relief for the minimum side yard, it can take advantage of the 4/10 clause for the aggregate side yard because even though it's larger than 40,000 square feet in the R40 district, it has a non-conforming lot width. At the time this lot became single and separate, the lot width requirement was 125 feet. It's now 150 feet. And as you can see from looking at the survey, the width of the lot is 140.75 feet. So when you do the calculation, the 4/10 of the lot width, I had it written here someplace. Yeah, that would give you an aggregate side yard of 56.3 feet, and actually we would have 57.3 feet, so we would conform with that. And not to paper you too much, but I have a copy of a variance
Plus you got
search.
39 plus 18.
Right. Exactly.
So you can use the 4/10ths for the aggregate, but
Yes.
not for the individual.
I don't need it for the individual because I conform, right, but I can use it for the aggregate. And I have a variance search that certifies that this lot was held in single and separate ownership since October 10th, 1972. The law changed in 1973, so the lot is lawfully single and separate, so I'll hand that up. And I also have a copy of the applicable zoning map and the zoning district regulations that were in effect when the lot became single and separate. I've circled the O2 zoning requirements. As you can see, the lot area didn't change, but the lot width did. So that's why we don't need a total side yard variance. So the only variance we need is this 2.1 feet at the corner for a total of 21 square feet of the total addition.
Can you explain why you can't use the 4/10ths rule to obtain relief for the...
I don't need it.
No, not for the aggregate, for the...
Because if you look at the table in section 116.11.1, for a lot this size, the minimum side yard is 20 feet.
Right.
So I'm able to use that. I'm not penalized. I don't have to have a grader. But because the lot is...
Wouldn't give them relief on the one side.
It would not give you relief on the...
Because 4/10ths of the 4/10ths comes out to 22 point something, and...
Right, and that's what the...
Required is 20.
Okay, gotcha.
Gets the benefit of the required.
Right, and that's why I made the point that the notice...
The 4/10ths of 4/10ths is actually 22.
22. But we don't need that because...
That's what the building department noticed.
Right. So we don't need as much relief as the building department noticed. And that's what I started my presentation with. As you can see, the problem exists by virtue of the fact that the house is not parallel to the lot line. It starts out, the addition conforms, and then it's slightly off because the further west you go, the closer to the line the house comes. As I mentioned, there are reasons, if you look at the floor plans, why the addition is being proposed where it is: to service the master bedroom, to be close to the other plumbing facilities, which this room does not have access to, but in terms of connections, that would work. I would note that there were a couple of letters from neighbors, and I'm more than happy to attempt to address those.
One from the Durants and one from the Lipton.
One from the Liptons, right. And what I did in terms of the Lipton application, I was lucky that the surveys that I found in the village records, the scale is the same as the survey that we have, so I put a composite of the two of them. And one thing I'll note is that Mrs. Lipton says the houses are very close together. Well, as a matter of fact, the Lipton house from our property line is 75.1 feet, and the closest part of that house is actually the Lipton's garage. When you add that setback to the setback we're proposing, there's a 93-foot setback between the addition and the neighbor's house. So I'll hand up a copy of that composite. It's clearly labeled, and you can add the two numbers up, and that's what you get.
Gil, while you're looking at that, is there any vegetation or fences or anything in between?
Yeah, there is. I have a series of pictures I'll hand up to show that. In fact, I can do that now. The first thing I'll hand up, which is a composite which answers both neighbors' questions. This is a Google Earth photograph of the property, and subject property is labeled here. The Lipton property is to the south of it, and the Grant property is to the southwest of it. And you can see that there is a substantial screening, there are substantial big trees directly opposite where the proposed addition will go, so I'll hand that up. And this also shows, as I mentioned, the location of the adjoining neighbors' houses, and it's clear to see what I just said. I couldn't have said it better than the picture, so I'll hand that up. I guess I might, at this point, I have only one set of color photographs, but these photographs were taken from the ground within the last week or two. This first one is looking You'll see here's the porch looking directly.
Facing the board?
Upside down. How's that?
A little more.
Other way?
No, the other way.
That's why.
Keep turning.
Keep turning it?
There you go.
Okay. Here's the porch on the back of the house, looking south. Here's the roof of one of the other houses. Here are the trees. And it's plain that there's a tremendous amount of screening.
That's looking to the south.
South, looking to the south, towards the neighbors that have raised an issue. This is another picture. It's basically the same shot. It's moved back a little bit. Again, look at the screening. This was just taken, so this is not a question of having deciduous trees.
Must be this one.
This is a ground shot looking.
Oh, right here, yeah, I see it.
Looking basically southwest. Again, you can see the amount of shrubbery that's there. Bear in mind, this is a one-story addition that's only 12 feet tall. And that's a similar picture. Here's the side of the house. The addition would be going right where my finger is. And this is a good one because this shows the existing house. These two cones show the extent of how far to the south the proposed addition would go. Another shot of the same thing. So I can give you multiple copies of this, but I was able to get this is a color set.
So it looks like the distance from this, your addition to the Lippman house is like about 90 feet.
93 feet. To the garage. To their garage. To their garage, to their attached garage. So to their living space, it's probably more than
20 feet.
It's probably 100 feet.
The grants look like it's more.
Yeah.
The grants is probably more, yeah.
Now we go to the grants. Dimensions, I got this right here. I scaled that off. I did the same thing. Again, I was lucky. The surveys were the same scale, so I was able
Better to be lucky than good, right?
That's right. You're right. In my case, I'll take it. So here's a map that shows that. And again, you see, I hope I've got it right this time. There's a juxtaposition of the two properties. Here's the applicant's property, the proposed addition. Here's the grant's house. I scale this distance from the nearest point of the grant's house to the nearest point of the addition at 145 feet.
Probably about how far out the addition was.
Now, bear in mind all the screening that's in between. You can't see anything. I would also mention to you that neither of these letters really raised any substantive objection. I think the grants said they didn't think variances were a good thing and they encouraged you not to act favorably, but they didn't mention how they were harmed by it. So,
Well, they seem to say there are other places on the property where you could have this addition, but
2 feet, 1 story.
you got the master bedrooms right there.
you got the master
You gotta
bedrooms.
move the master bedroom?
No, well, that's the whole point. And that the master bedroom doesn't have a bathroom, so they want to have a bathroom.
I think your addition is 7 feet wide, and
Yeah,
as an
7 feet.
alternative, cutting 2 feet off would make it almost...
I mean, I have to go like this in order to get in there.
Never.
That's right. That's why I think the stick, the talk softly carry a small stick, maybe that's...
Next time, could you bring 5 of those sticks for each board member?
Yeah, that's right. You don't want this for the... I can give it to you for the record if you want.
Yeah.
I know, I have the same problem. I think that's about it.
Do we have any questions? Jim?
No.
Dan? Mark?
No.
You'll have anything
Wayne?
to say?
Anybody from the public wish to be heard? Joe, you want to be heard to this one? Okay. Therefore, you want to close this?
Close it for decision. I think we have enough information, Mr.
Can I
Flanagan.
have a motion to close?
I'll give you more if you want.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Thanks very much.
Didn't get an aerial photograph. Was there-
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah,
The January 2018 meeting of the South End Village Zoning Board of Appeals is closed.